He didn't leave a note. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't expect anyone to notice. Evan had made up his mind. It was a quiet decision. Not dramatic, not loud, just final. It had been building for months. A slow fade, not a sudden collapse. He walked through the city as if it were any other night. The traffic lights blinked like normal. People passed by without looking. Just another man in a jacket with hands in his pockets. But inside, he had already disappeared. He climbed the steps of the old pedestrian bridge he used to walk across after work. Not because it meant anything, just because it was familiar, private. There were no tears, no last phone call, just silence, cold and clean. He stood at the edge, looked down, and then he heard a voice behind him. "Hey man, you okay?" Just 3 words, simple, human, unexpected. He turned around, and in that moment, everything stopped. It hadn't started with a tragedy. No one died. No disaster came. No single moment turned the lights off. Instead, it was slow. Evan used to enjoy his life. Not in a flashy way. He wasn't chasing fame or fortune. He liked his job, kept to himself, had a few good friends. Weekends meant coffee shops, a book, maybe a phone call to his mom. Nothing grand. But it felt enough. Then things began to shift. His friends got busier. The calls grew shorter, the conversations shallower, the texts fewer and further between. At work, he felt less visible. He started missing deadlines, not by much, just enough for people to notice and stop including him in projects. His manager called him in once and asked if he was okay. Evan smiled and said yes. It was easier that way. The days started to blend. Morning alarms became snoozed until noon. Dinners were forgotten. His apartment stayed dark even in daylight. He wasn't sad, exactly. He just couldn't find a reason to move. The worst part wasn't the loneliness. It was the quiet. The way no one noticed he had stopped showing up. How nothing around him seemed to react. He wasn't angry at anyone. He just started to believe the thought that kept echoing in the back of his mind. It doesn't matter if I'm here or not. And when that belief settled deep enough, when it stopped feeling like a passing thought and started feeling like the truth, that's when he found himself on the bridge. Not because he wanted to die, but because he couldn't remember what living was supposed to feel like. The bridge was quiet. A few cars passed below, headlights tracing lines across the wet pavement. In the distance, someone was playing music from a speaker, the sound barely audible above the wind. Evan stood still, hands resting on the cold metal railing. He didn't cry, he didn't shake. He just stood there. The thoughts that had followed him for months weren't screaming anymore. They were quiet now, not gone, just settled. Like dust on a bookshelf no one opened anymore. This wasn't about drama or attention. He wasn't angry, he wasn't blaming anyone. He was just tired. Tired of pretending he was okay. Tired of being invisible. Tired of feeling like every day was just a slightly dimmer copy of the one before. The scariest thing wasn't the thought of ending it. It was the idea that nothing would change if he did. He looked out over the edge. It wasn't high. It wasn't a movie scene. Just a real moment in a real city where too many people had stood before. And then, a voice. Not loud, not sharp, just there. "Hey man, you okay?" At first, Evan didn't turn around. He assumed it wasn't for him. But the voice came again, a little closer this time. "You don't have to talk, I've been there." Evan turned, and what he saw was not a police officer, not a therapist, not someone with a clipboard and a plan. Just a man, maybe in his 50s, wearing an old jacket, holding a cup of coffee. No judgment in his face, no fear, just presence. And something about that, about being seen without being asked to explain, made Evan take one small step back from the edge. He didn't say a word, but he stayed. And sometimes, staying is the bravest thing you can do. They sat in silence for a while. The man didn't ask questions. He didn't reach out. He didn't even look directly at Evan for the first few minutes. He just sat beside him. The kind of silence that feels safe, like a place to rest, not something to escape. Eventually, he spoke again. His voice was quiet, steady. "I used to come here too," he said, "a few years back. Different reasons, same feeling. Evan didn't respond. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't trust his voice to stay steady. The man didn't seem to mind. He took a sip of his coffee, looked out over the street below, then said something Evan would never forget. Whatever you're carrying, it's not yours alone. 7 words, spoken without pressure, without pity, just truth. Evan didn't break down. There were no dramatic tears, no movie moment of sudden healing. But something inside him shifted. He hadn't realized how heavy it all felt until that moment, how long he had been holding it alone. Those words didn't fix anything, but they interrupted the spiral. And sometimes, that's enough. Eventually, the man stood up, adjusted his jacket, and nodded. You don't have to talk tonight, just don't disappear. He started to walk away, then turned back. And if you ever want to talk, I'm usually around. Same coat, worse coffee. Then he was gone. Evan stayed a few minutes longer, not thinking, not deciding, just breathing. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel completely alone. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for tonight, he wasn't walking away from life. He was walking home. Evan didn't tell anyone about that night. He didn't post about it. He didn't write it down. He didn't even try to make sense of it. But the next morning, he did something different. He opened the curtains. The sun didn't pour in like some glorious awakening. It was just light. But after so many days of living in shadow, it felt new. He didn't feel better. He just didn't feel numb. And in some quiet way, that was progress. He showered. Not because he had somewhere to be, but because he remembered what it felt like to take care of his body. He made coffee. It tasted bitter, but real. He looked at his phone and, for the first time in weeks, replied to a message. It wasn't long. Just a, yeah, I'm around. Let's catch up soon. But it was a start. Days passed like that. Nothing dramatic. No instant clarity. No sudden joy. Just life. Waking up. Breathing. Making meals. Going for walks without a destination. Letting silence be less scary. He didn't see the man from the bridge again, but he thought about him often. About those words. Whatever you're carrying, it's not yours alone. He started journaling. Not every day, but often enough to notice patterns in his own mind. On one page, he wrote, I don't know what healing looks like, but I think it starts with noticing you're still here. That sentence stayed with him. He wasn't chasing happiness anymore. He was choosing presence. And that choice, repeated quietly, day after day, became something solid enough to stand on. A year later, Evan's life didn't look perfect. He still had off days, still struggled with focus, still battled the occasional voice that whispered he wasn't enough. But now he had tools, he had people, he had himself. More than anything, he had a different kind of awareness, one that paid attention not just to his own needs, but to the silence in others. He noticed when someone at work stopped speaking up in meetings. He noticed when the barista's hands shook while pouring coffee. He noticed when a stranger stared out the train window just a little too long. And sometimes, he did something about it. Not speeches, not advice, just presence. A short message, a quiet check-in, a simple question. You okay? He never forgot what that question had done for him. It hadn't fixed him. It had interrupted the silence. That was enough. One evening, walking home, he passed the bridge. The wind was picking up. The city lights flickered off the water below. He slowed as he reached the top of the walkway. Someone else was there. A young man, hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched, eyes locked on the ground. Evan didn't hesitate. He walked up slowly, stood beside him, gave it a beat, then said quietly, You okay? The young man didn't respond right away. But he didn't move either. Evan waited, not to save him, just to remind him. He wasn't invisible. And in that moment, something passed between them. Not a solution, just a beginning. Maybe you've never stood on a bridge. Maybe you've never heard the silence that Evan did, but chances are, someone around you has. And you may never know when your words are the only thing standing between someone and their breaking point. It won't always be obvious. There won't be a sign. There won't be music playing in the background. It will look like a quiet moment, a passing glance, A pause in the hallway, a stranger looking away too quickly. That's when it matters most. That's when one kind word can change everything. So say it. Say, "You okay?" Say, "I see you." Say, "You're not alone." You don't have to fix anyone. You don't have to be a hero. You just have to be human. If this story meant something to you, let it go further. Share it. Comment below with the moment that hit you hardest. And subscribe to Awakened Wisdom, because we believe in the power of real stories. And we know the next one might not just change a life, it might save one.